Guess who got brands talking? Brandlive.co.za.
Good morning, listeners. You're tuned into the Greenovation radio show with me, Diane Naidu. And this morning we are talking, as usual, all things climate change, but we are most excited about climate solutions. We are also excited about entrepreneurs in the green economy and innovation that is sustainable. This morning we are joined by David Shelby, who is the Director for Public Affairs at the U.S. State Department. Is that correct, David?
That is correct.
Great. Welcome to the show. Thank you for making time for us this morning.
Diane, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. So, David, we didn't get the chance to meet at the Energy21 Summit over the last 2 days, but it was thrilling. I'm really excited that renewable energy and climate change certainly is taking center stage in communications teams at various companies as well as in government. It's always been a challenge to sell what is seen at times as a soft news story. I'd like to ask you to share with our listeners, what was this Energy21 initiative all about? Why has this been a focal point for the U.S. Embassy in particular?
Sure, happy to. So I am actually with the U.S. Department of State based in Washington, so that's our Ministry of Foreign Affairs essentially. And probably about 8 or 10 months ago, our embassy here in South Africa reached out to me in my office and said that they would really like to engage with South Africa on renewable energy because they feel like it's a really interesting area. It's a very active and innovative area. There's a lot of interesting things happening here, that there's a really good news story here. So I have spent the past few months doing some research on South Africa's energy sector and renewable energy here in particular. And what I discovered was that, in fact, it is a really exciting time in South Africa for renewables, that the Department of Energy, through the REAP program, has done some really interesting things over the past few years, built out quite a bit of capacity in renewable energy generation. But unfortunately, what I learned is that most people don't even know about it. Most people are not aware of what's happened, that there has been so much progress, and also of the benefits that South Africa has derived from this. In terms of job creation, in terms of foreign direct investment, in terms of creating whole new industries. So there's a lot of really exciting things there that people are not aware of. And we also learned, as we did some research and some surveys, that people even have sort of misperceptions about what is the viability of renewable energy. People think it's too expensive, it's too impractical, it's unreliable. And in fact, that's not the case. That may have been the case a few years ago, but technology has improved dramatically over the past few years. Prices have come down also dramatically, so that new wind and solar energy facilities are actually cheaper than any new fossil fuel production plant. So we feel like there's an interesting story there, and we just wanted to create this Energy21 Exchange Hub to bring together people working in this sector and give them an opportunity to talk about and think about how they can do a better job of communicating. So we brought in some communications experts to work with them on what it is that they're doing and who they're talking to and how they're framing their story. And it was an exciting time. I think we had a lot of positive feedback, and we were delighted that we could be part of it.
I think you said it quite correctly, that a lot of people don't really know what renewable energy is all about, and it's the bigger part in South Africa and certainly in other parts of Africa where people don't really understand it. They don't know what it is. It's a case of, I think WWF had this amazing campaign which started last year, which says water does not come from a tap. In the same way that energy doesn't come from a plug. Our power supply doesn't come from a light bulb. And I think people are unaware of the positives of renewables versus fossil fuels. Have you found that to be the same in the States, or have you had renewables for so long that people are aware of the benefits?
Well, and I actually think it's a common problem around the world. And I think it goes back to, as I was saying earlier, that the developments are happening so fast in this industry that unless you're just a specialist and paying special attention to the industry, you don't really know how much has happened and how much exciting innovation is going on out there. there's several countries who have been investing very deeply in renewable energy. The United States has, South Africa, as I mentioned, has, other countries, China, Japan, some countries in Europe. And what happens once you start creating all of this new demand is, of course, you create better supply chains, you create economies of scale, you create whole new industries that are able to support this, and the price comes down. And then on top of that, you have any number of research institutions that are working on improving the technology so that it's working better, it's working more efficiently, it's working faster. So really, it's just within the past few years that this story has become such an exciting story. And so I think, it's not just South Africa that where we need to be working on raising awareness. But I do feel like South Africa is a particularly exciting place to be doing it, just because the government has been so forward-leaning over the past few years in developing this sector. And I feel like there's so much momentum here that it's a great time to focus people's attention on that and build hopefully some excitement about moving forward.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It is an exciting time for South Africa, and having been personally involved in the communication side, I mean, pre-IRP 2010, when we were having all of these meetings with government, it wasn't an easy sell. So I'm glad that you feel it's an exciting time now, and I agree, but it was not an easy road to get to where we are right now. And I think the challenge now for South Africa is to build on the recent successes that we've had and to expand our commitment, certainly in terms of the Paris Agreement. I'm sure you are aware that most South Africans and those who are involved in the climate change space are concerned about your president-elect, who has been very vocal about his climate change doubts and his intent for a deepened dependency on coal. As one of the world leaders, a country which is certainly leading global economies, should Africans be concerned about what this means? If we have a president of the United States who does not believe in climate change, who does not believe that renewables is necessarily the way to go, should we be concerned?
So, yeah, and I'm glad you raised that. And I guess first off, I'd say that, the president-elect is not in office yet, so it would be premature for me to speculate exactly what his policies will be. However, I can say a couple of things on that. Number one, that there is broad bipartisan support in Washington for renewable energy. For instance, we have a solar investment tax credit that has been sort of key in the development of rooftop solar installations in the United States, that was put in place under George Bush's administration in 2005 with a Republican Congress, renewed most recently last year under Obama with a Republican Congress, and extended into 2023. So that's going to be in place for another 7 years. Now we'll continue to drive innovation in rooftop solar. But also, I would say, even more importantly, most of what is happening in the United States in the energy sector doesn't happen at the federal level. We have a very decentralized energy system, and most of it happens at the state and local level. And that's really where the momentum is. That's where the excitement is. And you can look at a lot of large states like California that is already about 25% renewable and has set forward a goal of being 50% renewable by 2030. But it's not just a fairly liberal state like California. You also look at a state like Texas, a very conservative state, which has now the largest installed wind generation capacity in the United States. In fact, I like to quote this little trivia, that if Texas was an independent country, it would have the second largest per capita wind generation capacity in the world after only Denmark. And when Texas does it, I can say this as someone who comes from Texas. I grew up there. I know the politics there. Texas doesn't do things because of environmental friendliness or climate change. Texas is actually the center of the United States oil and gas industry, as you may be aware. And so they're only doing it because it makes economic sense. And I think that's really sort of the exciting news here, is that, I personally think it's great that we're doing it because it's going to help us address the problems of climate change. But even if you don't think, climate change is an issue, as there are some people who don't, this is a great news story because it makes economic sense. So it's no longer a matter of just sort of environmental ideology that's driving renewable energy. It's really just the bottom line economics. It's actually cheaper to install renewable energy than it is to install fossil fuel.
I think I'm glad that you said it makes economic sense, because this is what I say to people when they say, well, you're one of those greenies and you are a tree hugger and whatever the case may be. When you start to say green is also the color of money, it definitely changes the conversation.
Yeah,
Um,
you're absolutely right. And I share your feelings. I mean, I am a bit of a tree hugger myself, but I like to be able to say, I don't care if you're a tree hugger. This makes economic sense. This makes sense for your pocketbook.
yeah, absolutely. And I think Denmark is probably one of the best examples. And in recent visits to Denmark, I've basically said to them that it's not unfair, but I think they've certainly had the distinct advantage of having 40 years of developing green technology in their country. And it certainly is a model for what a green economy can actually look like.
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. But I also think that the fact that you've got countries like Denmark and other countries that have spent so much time and effort over these past few decades building up capacities in these green technologies provides just an incredibly exciting opportunity for developing countries that are not completely bound to some of the old technologies, that you're still trying to build out your energy infrastructure. So you don't have to continue building out with sort of old fossil fuels. There's this exciting new opportunity to leapfrog ahead and actually embrace new energy technologies.
Yeah, I think that's I think a lot of it has to do with education, and we've spoken a lot over the last few days in our interviews with various thought leaders, academics, experts in their own field, that education definitely plays a big role in fostering a generation of climate change activists, green technologists, green technicians, green engineers. Would you agree?
I agree, absolutely. No, education is very important. And I mean, education at all levels. It's about sort of, a public information space. The media needs to be sort of aware and be focusing on this story. But also, I mean, there's a very important thing, technical capacity building that needs to be happening in schools, universities, vocational institutions. It's important. I'm glad that we can sort of bring some support to one part of this, which is sort of building a broader awareness in the public space about the great news that's going on here. But there's education across the board that needs to go on, because this is really new, cutting edge technology that we're dealing with here. So people who are working with it, people who are dealing with it, people who are going to have to be handling this in the building out and operating of the energy infrastructure are all going to need information about that. We just need education across the board.
Listeners, if you are just joining us now, we are joined by David Shelby via Skype. He is the Director of Public Engagement at the U.S. State Department, and we are talking about the Energy21 initiative workshop, seminar, summit of sorts, which was hosted by the U.S. Embassy over the last 2 days here in Pretoria, where we are talking about renewable energy, the climate change agenda. How do we communicate and how do we shape the narrative around climate change? How do we involve ordinary citizens, leaders, political leaders, business leaders in this conversation? David, thanks again for joining us. What I wanted to touch on is we obviously in South Africa, we have a view of what the States looks like and what the society is like, what the communities are like. But the one thing that I'm not too clear on, that I don't see too much of, is the climate change NGO space. How active is your NGO sector? How active are your ordinary citizens in the debate around climate change and climate change action?
Oh, yeah. So the NGO sector, civil society in the United States in the environmental space, has been extremely active, and has been growing in numbers and in force and in their capability to communicate tremendously over the past few decades. I'm sure most of you and your listeners are at least somewhat familiar with our former Vice President Al Gore, who has taken on climate issues as sort of a key initiative of his in his post-political career. And he's been very active, not only in the United States but around the world. And I think I think that I would look back at that, see sort of a watershed moment in the United States awareness of and attention on climate issues and related energy issues. Ever since he took that on as his mission, he's done a fantastic job, not only through his own organization, but also through empowering others in related organizations to do a better job of communicating, to do a better job of engaging their local communities. So it's very common now that you will find activists who are engaging in local schools and local organizations to raise awareness about these issues.
And I think there's a lot to be said for the power of just that one movie that was made, An Inconvenient Truth, which ruffled feathers since it was first launched until now. And I think it's fantastic that we are using creative industries to tell our stories.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's very important, and that's why, particularly in this Energy 21 Exchange Hub that we held here in Pretoria, we looked at bringing in people from not necessarily from the renewable energy background at all, people who had a background in drama and theater and filmmaking and all various types of communications, just so that people could be exposed to thinking different ways of communicating. It's not just about putting out a press release. It's not just about building a website and hoping that people will come to it. There are any number of ways that we can be engaging digitally as well as offline. And I was very pleased and excited, actually, that some of the solutions that came out of it, because part of yesterday's program was for the participants to come up with, specific communications products and strategies. And pleased that, one group came up with, they went out and in just 1 hour shot a video, which was a lovely little video that kind of captured what people need to know about renewable energy. Another group came up with a rap song, and it was wonderful. It was just people thinking about various different ways that they can be engaging in different audiences and how they're going to connect with different audiences. I think that's very important for all of us who are interested in renewable energy and are excited about trying to communicate the messaging.
Yeah, and I think I have to agree that communications, public relations, what we know as traditional media, has evolved at such a rapid pace over the last 10 to 15 years, I'd say. Just when you think you've nailed down this next trend or this next fad, it's changed. And I think we've got to be a lot more creative and innovative, and certainly out-the-box thinking is what will definitely work in future. How have you used that in the States? What sort of activations, what sort of tools or platforms have you used to communicate around renewables?
So, so my work specifically being with the State Department, I'm focused on how do we engage foreign audiences, but within the states, as I mentioned previously, we've got any number of civic organizations, NGOs now, that are using any number of digital platforms, all social media platforms that you can imagine, all sorts of creative new social media capabilities and thunderclaps and Twitter and Instagram and putting out YouTube videos, as well as having offline action, engaging locally in community organizations, but also getting people out on the street to march, to talk about, these are important issues. We need to raise awareness. We need to get, the larger traditional media focused on what we're talking about as well by making public presence. So yeah, in the States, you see it in an incredible array of actions from online to offline, from large scale to small scale, using every single platform that's available.
Yeah, I think what's also important is to talk about the role of entrepreneurs and small business in this transition to a green, carbon neutral economy. Do you believe that there is a role for entrepreneurs, small business, young people in this transition?
Absolutely, and I think that's actually one of the most exciting stories. Certainly in the United States, the green economy has been fostering a lot of new small businesses that are growing up around it, and particularly in solar and in wind. But I've seen the same thing here in the past few months that I've been researching this sector here in South Africa, is that there's a lot of small businesses that are growing up around the solar and wind projects that have been developed here. People may not even be aware that, 5 years ago, South Africa didn't have solar panel manufacturers and wind turbine manufacturers. And these are industries that now exist here in this country. And there are any number of sort of feed-in industries that are building up around it, suppliers, as well as people who, are helping in the transportation and all the various support sectors around it. So I see this industry as just creating an enormous amount of opportunity, and there are organizations as well in South Africa that are really helping to foster that. I know particularly a couple that I'm familiar with down in Cape Town and Port Elizabeth, where some of the local governments have built uh, business incubators that are focused specifically on renewable energy, and there's people who are working there in LED efficiency light bulbs, people working on wind turbines, that have been tailored specifically for use in South Africa. So there's any number of small businesses that are growing up around this already, and I see just additional opportunity moving forward.
David, here at Greenovation, we believe that necessity and sometimes poverty has been the mother of innovation and invention. And the renewable energy sector, because it draws on natural resources, we are finding more and more young people, more and more innovators who are looking at their natural resources and looking at how to use them more optimally, how to respond to their own social ills, their social challenges that they face. And that for me is really what this renewables program has done for South Africa.
I think you're absolutely right, and I love that you say that need is what gives rise to innovation. And again, I go back to the fact that there are still a number of areas in South Africa and communities that are in complete energy poverty and that have a huge need for it. And there's just an enormous opportunity to go in there and do off-grid solar installations that's going to provide energy to places that have never had them in the past. And so, I mean, from everything from the very small scale in rural communities that haven't been electrified before, up to the utility scale, some of the things that the Department of Energy here has been doing over the past few years, I think there's just a huge opportunity across the board to fill in some of the gaps in South Africa's energy infrastructure. And that the need that exists through those energy those energy gaps, I think is providing forward movement for the innovation that it is now filling up those gaps.
That's great. Thank you, David, for joining us this morning. We believe, again, at Greenovation, when we talk to green entrepreneurs, when we talk to aspirant entrepreneurs in the space, we say that people should look at their pain points and make them paying points and create businesses out of what their issues are, basically. David, any final words to the South African listeners about the country's renewables program?
So I just have to say I love exactly what you said there. It's look at the pain point and making a paying point. I haven't heard that before, but I think that's exactly what people need to do in terms of looking for opportunities to engage in the energy sector. And I would just say that there is phenomenal opportunity out there. I think, as I mentioned, South Africa has been very forward-leaning and has created sort of the beginnings of an industry, of a green industry there. And I think it's only going to continue to grow and provide additional benefits, economic benefits, and profitability moving forward. So I encourage everyone to get out there and tell your friends and your family that renewables are here, renewables are now, renewables are affordable, renewables are reliable, and it's really a key energy source that South Africa needs to be looking toward as they move forward.
Listeners, you've been listening to David Shelby, who is the Director of Public Engagement at the U.S. State Department. And we've been talking about the Energy21 Summit, which happened in Pretoria over the last 2 days. We were hosted by the U.S. Embassy as well as their partners at CSIR. David, it's been wonderful chatting to you. I'm so glad that you had time in your schedule for us. And like we say here at Greenovation, we have 53 million voices in South Africa. I'm using mine, use yours.
Thank you very much, Diane.
Thank you.
Have you ever thought about the power of social media? Social media has the power to make your business grow. Grow! Yeah. Why don't you let us manage your social media? Because our business is to see your business grow. Visit us at www.bstownmedia.co.za.
Hi. Anybody?